Physics Bites,
a science podcast in English by the students of Notre-Dame d'Ascension.
So, hello again, and welcome to a new episode of Physics Bites, the English language physics podcast of the students at Notre-Dame d'Ascension. We have two new students today who are going to talk to us about the prospects of interstellar travel. We have Siddharth and Basile. Do you guys want to say hello?
Hello, everyone. I'm Siddharth.
Hi, everyone. I'm Basile.
So, you guys have been in my class for the last 2 years. Siddharth, what did you present last year when you were in grade 11?
Last year I presented Isaac Newton.
That's right, Isaac Newton. And Basile, what did you present last year?
I present Feynman, Richard Feynman, and the diagram, the Feynman diagram. Right. You had a very ambitious project of trying to explain to us with our little grade 11 minds about what Feynman diagrams are and path integrals and all that stuff. It was fun times. Okay, so I guess the subject this time around is a bit more easy to talk about. You guys took us on a bit of a voyage, telling us about the different means of interstellar travel, some which are current, others which are conceptual, and the other ones which are just pure science fiction.
Yeah.
So how about we start with a little summary? You guys can maybe tell us about it, in a short form way, what the different technologies that you guys talked about are, and then we'll go into questions from your classmates.
Okay, so I guess I'll start.
Sure.
So I personally talked about electric thrusters, and then I went into more theoretical ways of interstellar travel, like warp drives and wormholes. So currently the main methods that are used are thrusters. So we have electric thrusters are like the general concept that is used, and we have like sub thrusters, basically like ion and plasma thrusters. Mm-hmm. So what they do is they create thrust by accelerating ions using electricity. So what it does is it ionizes a neutral gas, and it creates a cloud of positive atoms that is then let out of the ship to create thrust. So ion thrusters usually use electromagnetic thrusters. So it's basically the Lorentz force, which is a combination of electric and magnetic forces. Mm-hmm. And then we have plasma thrusters, which uses the Coulomb force. So where you have it quantifies the amount of force between two stationary electric charged particles.
Right, and this is a technology that has sort of existed for a few decades, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah, so it's what's currently being used, and they keep on trying to innovate it, so to create like methods to use, for example, less gas. So I believe the most recent use was for the Dawn mission by NASA.
Okay.
So it was the first deep space mission using electric propulsion. So it reached the Vesta and Ceres orbit, which is an asteroid belt. And so this, compared to normal chemical thrusters, it's a question of weight. So for example, the electric thrusters only uses 4 kilograms of xenon, whereas if it was chemical, it would use between 6 to 8 tons.
Okay. So is there a way maybe you can just give us a very qualitative sketch of what the principle of this kind of propulsion is? Because so you talk about electric, you talk about ion engines and stuff. What is it that's actually pushing our rocket forward? What is it that's propelled? This main sort of reason there's propulsion when we're talking about an electric sort of a propulsion system.
So what happens is we inject gas, so in this case xenon usually, inside a chamber, where this gas will first be accelerated by ions using electricity, and then after that we have electrons that are used to make the gas neutral again. And then what happens is that gas can freely disperse in space without causing any electrical problems with the thruster itself.
Okay. Just as a Reminder, ions are normal atoms or molecules that are electrically charged because they've sort of lost or gained an electron, and so when you put them in an electrical field, they will react to it, right? They'll be either drawn or pushed away, repulsed by something. And if I understand it correctly, the idea here is that you have a source of ions or charged particles, and then by submitting it to an electrical field, they sort of get ejected really quickly out of the rocket. And by pushing it back, just like we would with fuel that's burning, Newton's third law, we push on the particles and the particles get pushed back on the rocket, and that's what's causing the propulsion. Is that it?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. In that case, what is, if any, the main advantage of this kind of sort of propulsion compared to a classic combustion where you have some sort of a fuel, whether it's oxygen, hydrogen, or more classic like kerosene or something like that?
So first, it's a question of simply weight. Using chemical reactions, you need much more space to keep the chemicals that you're using. And normally the engines that are used are also way smaller in electric or ion thrusters. So it helps also, I guess, you can have more space to add, for example, more research material than the propulsion itself.
Okay.
And it's also cheaper.
Cheaper in what way do you mean?
Well, to build it, the building of the engine is normally a little bit cheaper than usual chemical thrusters because of the size of the chemical thrusters, you need more materials, etc.
Right. So it's a question of, I guess, we just use less materials. Whereas, for example, if we send a rocket into space to want to go to the moon, like 90% of the weight of the rocket is basically the fuel.
Exactly.
And that fuel, usually, if it's like oxygen and hydrogen, you have to keep it in liquid form. And okay. And you're saying that this stuff not only has been tested, we've actually used it for...
Yeah, we've used it for deep space missions.
Okay. Are there any disadvantages of this sort of propulsion system compared to the classic combustion?
For the moment, no. I guess it's just more a question that it's not available to every country that would like to go into space because it is still quite complicated to build.
Okay, so it's a question of technological complexity that is.
But in a general sense, there's no specific disadvantage.
Okay, does it have the same power as a combustion propulsion system, or
for the moment, I believe it's a little bit slower.
Okay.
But that's only to get out of the atmosphere, whereas in space, I believe it's the same. But there has been a new study, I believe, where they have found, this time it's using metal pellets.
Okay.
And this is just theoretical, but if it was properly built, it would make us go to Mars in only 90 days instead of, I believe it's 9 months.
Yes, okay. So, if I'm not mistaken, the idea here is that you might have a smaller acceleration at any given moment, but you can have that same acceleration for a much longer period.
Yeah, so with time,
overall,
it'll be faster.
Right, I guess, which is similar to another technology that you guys talked about, which were solar sails. So, do one of you guys want to talk about that, solar sails?
Yes, so I talk about solar sails,
okay.
And this is the same the same thing with Bussard Ramjet and solar sails. So you use a big sail, and with the solar wind, it pushes the spacecraft, and it is a small acceleration, but in a long period of time. So let's, before we go any further, can you remind us what you mean by solar winds? Is it like winds when we're at the ocean? No, it's like so solar winds is particles that comes out from the sun, and it goes like a million miles per hour, and it's very small particles, but
and what
they are
these particles? What is the nature of these particles? What are they? What's creating it?
Atoms.
Okay, and why are they sort of flying around in space?
Because in the sun, there is like a fusion process,
mm-hmm.
and sometimes atoms and particles are pushed out
like
from
ejected.
the sun. Yes, more like
Okay.
ejected.
Okay, so basically, it comes from the natural activity at the surface of the sun. You have sort of explosions and these particles, very highly energetic, that are thrown out, which are charged particles, and they sort of flow through space, and they can cause problems on Earth, right? We're protected from them, but what protects us against solar winds on Earth?
On Earth, solar winds creates aurora boreal, I think.
Right.
The green thing. Yes, and our atmosphere protects us from this wind.
So is it the atmosphere that protects us, or is it rather...
I believe it's the ozone layer.
Not the ozone layer. Ozone layer.
It's not the ozone layer either.
No, it's not the ozone layer either. It's something else. It's the Earth's magnetic field.
Oh, okay.
Because these are charged particles, so they react to the magnetic field, which sort of directs them towards the poles, because the magnetic poles of the Earth are kind of aligned with the geological poles. And so that's why we see these aurora borealis in the northern and southern regions, because that's when those charged particles sort of react with the upper atmosphere, and they create a lot of energy, which shows up as these lights. Okay. So, again, we'll ask you the same question, Basile. What are the advantages and disadvantages of solar sails?
The advantages are like you don't need tanks for the fuel, because the fuel is actually in space.
Mm-hmm.
So it can be cheaper and not smaller, because the sails has to be very, very big. But with like the Bussard Ramjet, you can build not physical sails. You use a magnetic sails, and with this technique, you can have a smaller spacecraft with a big magnetic sails, and it can be like theoretically. It can have a huge scoop, which is like 500 kilometers radius. The radius.
Right. So the idea here being that what will determine how much force there is how big your sails are. What kind of materials would the sails be made of? Do you know? What does it look like? Does it have to have a special shape? Does it have to have a special size, a special thickness?
It has to be very, very big, but as well, both techniques are very theoretical, and actually, currently we can't create this type of spacecraft because it is too big. So I don't know if there is a perfect sails, like a perfect material to create these sails.
So we have never actually tested any sort of solar sail. I guess maybe tested as a prototype. Do you know?
I don't think so. It's not very recent, because it is a technique that has like 50 years.
Yeah.
But it's very theoretical, because the sail has to be huge, and it's impossible.
Right. In fact, even I remember hearing about this when I was a kid. The idea of a solar sail is the sort of thing that you see in science fiction movies, and it's something that sort of, if we actually manage to figure it out, could actually be quite ideal for interstellar travel, where we have long distances that you need to get up to really fast speeds, but you have time to do it. So I suppose, what are other than the fact that we haven't built one and it requires special materials to build a sail like that, maybe into something that big, what are some advantages of this method of interstellar propulsion?
I know that if the scoop is big enough, we can reach Proxima Centaurus in around 5 years, which is not very long. So and with our spacecraft that we use. It's like 100 of 1,000 years to reach Proxima Centaurus.
So we usually do this in class when we do some basics of speed and velocity and time and distance. If we use speeds that we have with our current rocket technology to get to the nearest star in the galaxy or in the universe to us, it takes about 125,000 years, which is a bit too long, I think. How do we manage with solar sails then to get to 5 years for that distance? That's almost at the speed of light, because at the speed of light, we would be about three years to get there, and this is 5 years, so it means that we're at speeds which are tremendously close to the speed of light. How does that work? How can solar sails get us up to such a speed?
The problem is the start, because we need to be 2 times faster than we currently can be with our ramjet. But then when we have this acceleration at the starting point, then we can use the solar wind and the particles that are in space, and then the acceleration is big enough to reach a speed very close to the speed of light. So we can go we can reach Proxima Centaurus Proxima in around 5 years.
So the idea, again, kind of similar to the ion propulsion, is that you may have a very small acceleration, but you can have it for a very long time, and if we do the calculations, if we have it for long enough, your speed will slowly creep up to very, very high speeds. And I guess the other advantage of this is that you don't actually have to think about fuel, because it's sort of out there in space, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you know if any tests have been planned or anything like that?
No, because actually even the scoop that we can build are too small to test this technique.
All right. So, what were some of the other methods of interstellar propulsion besides these various electric ion engines, besides the solar sail one that you guys came across and you presented?
So we have more into the theoretical and science fiction types of propulsion. So I talked about warp drives and wormholes. So a warp drive is...
So before that, I think you guys also talked about the Bussard Ramjet.
Yes, that was Basile.
That was Basile.
Yes,
well, maybe we can talk about that, because it's still less science fiction-y than wormholes and black holes. Can you tell us what that was? Because that was one of those topics that a lot of your classmates had questions about.
Yes. So the Bussard Ramjet is a ramjet that use the fusion of atoms.
So what is a ramjet? All right. Can you tell us what a ramjet is, as opposed to, I guess, a normal jet or some other kind of a jet?
Yeah, it used like a big scoop to take all the particles that are in space and put it in the middle where the engine is. So then with the fusion of those particles, it can create a huge amount of energy.
Okay, so it's sort of flying through space, and there's this sort of a big scoop in front of it, and this scoop is sort of picking up just any sort of materials, particles, dust, whatever there is on its path. And then what is it happening to these particles that it's scooping up?
Then the engine create a fusion, and with the energy that is released, it can.
So why is this producing fusion? How is this producing fusion?
It's also the problem. It's because even on Earth. So it's all another problem with this theory. It's because on Earth we can't use the amount of energy that is released during fusion. And with this engine, we need to use the energy that is released during fusion.
Okay. How theoretical or realistic is this Bussard Ramjet? Has somebody actually tried to build a prototype to see if it works or not, or what are some limitations in case we have it?
It's like a theory because we don't know how to use the energy that is created with fusion, and also we can't build a scoop big enough. But no one ever tried to create a Bussard Ramjet. But if one day we can use the energy that is created with fusion, then it would be possible to create one ramjet like that.
And to what kind of speeds does this get us up to? Do you know?
Yes, then it can reach like 99% of the speed of light, so very, very fast.
Okay, so this would be ideal if we actually ever get there for interstellar travel. All right, so coming back to Siddharth, you wanted to venture into even more theoretical
science fiction.
Yeah. So talk to us.
So we have first we have warp drives. So it's a theoretical spacecraft that could technically achieve even faster than light speeds.
Right, and this was made by Star Trek, I guess.
Yeah.
For those who know,
it was theorized in the 90s, I believe.
I think
at least the engine.
Even before that, so it was being used as an idea, I think even in the 1960s and 70s for Star Trek, and then I guess in the 1990s people started to think about
look into it.
Yeah, if it's actually possible or not.
So it was first what we call the Alcubierre drive. So it was proposed by a Mexican theoretical physicist in 1994. Mm-hmm. So what it was is basically it's a spacecraft that can contract space in front of it and expand space behind it. So what it would do is it would basically bend, I guess, the laws of space, so that because normally we can't go faster than light. Mm-hmm. But if you're not following the basic principles that work in space, then you're not technically breaking those laws.
Well, it's even more clever than that, is that we can't go faster than the speed of light, and when distances are big, then the time it takes to traverse those distances is long. So what the warp drive does is actually it just sort of crumples up those distances, like you mentioned, in front of the ship, and making it shorter in a way, right? So you're not going faster than light. It's just that
you're reducing basically the distance,
right? By warping actual space. So you're kind of cheating, but in a legal way, I guess.
But it's really theoretical because, first off, to deform space-time, we would need a huge mass into like a really, really small bubble, I would say, which was actually supposed to be thinner than in the nucleus of an atom. And so we obviously do not know at all how to do that. And on top of that, since if we're contracting space in front of us, we would have to expand it behind us. And to do that, we would need to create some sort of anti-gravity field using negative energy. But for the moment, we don't know how to use that.
This whole idea of negative energy, what does it mean? What does it not mean? Has there been any tests of a warp drive outside of the science fiction world?
I don't think there have been any real-life tests.
Right, the problem being that the energies required are just tremendous. For one thing, the other problem would be, I guess, if somehow we were able to find these kind of tremendous energies, how would we ever keep it stable to actually travel around?
Yeah.
But there is research being done on this.
Yeah, there is research being done. Okay. But the problem, for example, with the negative mass is that it's a theory in itself because we don't even know if in the universe it exists. So negative mass is basically it's a region where the energy of the universe is less than that of an ordinary vacuum.
Right.
So you did this experiment in class where, technically speaking, for example, if we take the table as our basic point,
Right.
And
we talk about like gravitational potential energy, right?
And we like drop an object underneath the table. Technically, since we took the table as our basic starting point, it's negative energy.
Right. So it's a question of like negative in a relative sense, not in an absolute sense, right?
Not in an absolute sense.
But it remains to be seen what that means when we're talking about vacuum energy and how to actually create something like that when it comes to that. What else did you find in your science fiction crawl?
So now we have the wormholes.
Right.
So it's basically it's kind of like the warp drive, except that instead of deforming like just the space around the spaceship, we would literally deform an entire distance, for example, between point A to point B. So this experiment, I mean, to show it physically, would be like you take a piece of paper and you fold it in two.
Right.
That's technically what a wormhole
and then
does.
You connect 2 points, which normally would be at the two ends of the paper. So in a way, you're making a shortcut.
Yeah.
Right.
The only problem with this is that wormholes aren't natural. At least we haven't found any natural wormholes. Right. So they would have to be artificially made. And again, the problem comes back because we would need. So the theories. So we have Lorentzian wormholes. So they are studied by experts in the Einstein equations.
Right.
But the problem is we can't prove that they exist, but we can't also prove that they don't exist. So again, with the warp drives, they would also need negative mass to hold them together, because what would happen is, theoretically, if a wormhole was to exist, even if we managed to go through, and if there is an external, material inside the wormhole, it would instantly collapse into itself.
Right, because again, this is actually your classmates, Marc, Alexandre, and Antoine, were talking about this in a more theoretical way on their cosmology presentation. The idea being that, again, gravity, space-time, the geometry of space-time and all that, they're all linked. And to do this, you need very, very, very high energies. And then there's a question of stability, because a wormhole, as soon as something is going through that sort of deformed piece of space, it's going to influence the deformation of that space. And so how do we make something that doesn't collapse on itself, like you said? But that doesn't keep us from imagining, if we did have wormholes, all the fun stuff we could do, right?
Yeah.
All right. Anything else from your presentations before we go on to a couple of questions from your classmates?
I've said what I did mainly, sorry. I don't know if Basile.
Basile, did you have anything else to add in terms of what you guys were talking about?
No, nothing else.
Okay. So a few of the questions from your classmates, they were very interested in the whole Ramjet principle, and also they really liked the idea of the solar winds. So regarding both of them, the question that came up was, how do you start something like that? How do you start like the fusion of hydrogen with the Ramjet for it to start going? And I think you mentioned it, the idea of like the first movement of a solar wind guided sort of a spaceship.
Yes, it's actually one of the biggest problems with this Ramjet. I don't know if we currently use the best spacecraft that we discovered, and it's too slow to start the Ramjet, so we don't actually discover any engine or thing that can propose the Ramjet fast enough.
So the idea is that you need to have a certain minimum velocity for the stuff that's getting trapped in the scoop of the Ramjet to actually start getting into fusion, to sort of start pushing the spacecraft, and we have no way of getting up to that critical speed yet, which is a problem.
So we need another engine, like a more conventional engine to propose the Ramjet.
So in a way, maybe in the end, we might need a sort of a combination of these various ideas and concepts and technologies, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's get more into the whole idea of interstellar travel. Do you guys think we're ever going to be able to make it to another star in our lifetime? Realistically speaking.
Personally, in our lifetime, I don't think so.
Right. So,
but maybe in a couple of 100 years, maybe.
So what is the main difficulty for humans? What is
now,
it that's going to prevent us, at least in our lifetimes, to actually make it, to do any form of interstellar travel? What is the limitation? What is the main limitation or limitation?
Well, first, expenses, because testing out different types of theories is extremely expensive.
Mm-hmm.
And those are just tests, so not even the actual final engines.
Mm-hmm.
And currently, with global warming, etc., I believe that the general population might find it better to invest in like more ecological things than actual interstellar travel.
Right. So it's very difficult to motivate people to get excited about something that is so abstract and so far from the actual problems that need solving in the immediate, I guess, sense.
And even if we did have the funding, we don't at least now have the theoretical knowledge to build an engine that would at least... I mean, we could build an engine that could take us to the nearest star, but the crew members would be dead way before even reaching.
Right. So I guess in a way, the problem boils down to our lives are just too short when it comes to the scale of the universe and the cosmos.
Unless we can theoretically build, I guess what we see in movies like cryo chambers, which do exist, but I believe that in space there are like way too many complications.
Right, the idea being that we put humans into hibernation so that they don't actually have to live through the long durations of travel. So I guess in a way that's sort of tunneling through time in a very not exciting way rather than actually tunneling through space only. Okay, I think we've kind of gone through most of the topics that you guys talked about. Any final words? What did you guys find interesting? What did you find most striking in your research and what you found? What did you find what stuck with you?
Well, for me it was in the more theoretical things. I didn't really know much about warp drives and wormholes, but actually like reading into it, it's a very interesting concept. So I guess that really stuck with me. The basic thrusters that we used, I guess it was fun, like how it worked, but other than that, I preferred the more science fictional.
Right, it's more it's fun to think about. I guess I should add that neither of you guys actually are doing physics this year, right?
No, I stopped it last year.
You stopped last year, and I think, Basile, were you doing physics last year?
Yes, I stopped last year also.
So I think it was all the more commendable because both of you sort of stopped doing, call it science in the strictest sense last year, and yet you guys were still working on this and found a lot of interesting stuff. What were you going to say, Basile?
For me, the part that struck me was the theoretical part. Of course, every ramjet and like techniques that we discovered, but also the fact that people like the guy that creates or discovered the Bussard Ramjet worked on it during his whole life and never achieved it in a way because we never create a Bussard Ramjet yet.
Right, so you find that kind of amazing that somebody could work on something all their life without actually ever seeing it come to fruition, and yet they kept their motivation and kept at it.
Yes.
All right. So I think we can maybe end it there. Thank you very much for the very interesting topic. I think it's one of those topics that sort of wakes up the imagination of everybody as soon as we start talking about it. Everybody from a young age is always thinking about how to get to the stars. And so you guys gave us a few concrete paths in that direction, while keeping us in check with the idea that we're not really probably going to get there yet.
Yeah.
All right. So thank you both of you guys for the topic, the presentation, the interview, and we're looking forward to seeing your posters when we get to the end of the year.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a nice day, both of you guys.
Thank you. You too, sir.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.